Okay, I'll get started. We've just decided to slightly change our running order. Yael and I share a studio space in Camden, in a Camden Council building from the late 1970s. And we're going to talk about our architectural practices. So we have 5 minutes each. And I have to spend the first few seconds jumping through to my part of the presentation, so just bear with me. Hopefully this will work. Nope? Any idea? I'm not getting any activity at all.
It doesn't go here.
Got a pointer? Okay, right, good. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Fine, so I'll jump through. So you're getting a quick sneak preview of the last part of the presentation. Okay. So I have a very, very small practice. Right now, there are just 2 of us in the office. And I also, in parallel with being an architect, I have a tiny software studio. I'm going to talk very quickly about 6 projects. 3 of these could be very broadly described as participative, and 3 of them illustrate the kind of domestic architectural projects that are the bread and butter of my architectural studio. The first project is the Lego house. It was designed for a TV presenter called James May, and his team had gone off onto the Lego internet site and bought 3 million pieces of Lego from Pick-a-Brick. The challenge was to put together this many bricks in a very short period of time. And the only way to do that was to have a lot of labor. So we had 5,000 people involved in building the house, and we built it in a month. We thought, how can we do that? We thought, let's make a house by building lots of small houses. So, for instance, this is one of the windows in the house, but it's actually an apartment block, and you can see the scale of the people underneath it. Inside, the apartment block obviously has a different kind of characteristic, and I was surprised. In fact, I found it quite magical how the children's toy changed itself into quite a surprising kind of architecture with great subtlety. It was very sharp and bold and modern. At the same time, it was quite soft and reflective and picked up the environment around it. Another thing that came out of this was we had 3 million pieces of Lego that had been bought online, but we needed more. So we asked the general public to donate their bricks, and we used those to start to make more subtle, interesting parts of the building. This is a stained glass window that was built by someone who was actually doing an art degree, and they got obsessed by building this. Second project, totally different kind of thing, but around the same time. My wife is from central Italy, and her home city of L'Aquila was hit by a major earthquake in 2009. And in the year afterwards, local people found themselves essentially disenfranchised from rebuilding their city. And so, learning from working with people on the Lego house, I thought, well, let's get lots of people involved in trying to explain what's happened in the city and to think about how the city can be replanned. And the first step in that was to go into the city that had been made off limits by the government and to photograph every single building. And over the course of about 3 months, every weekend we went in there. I think we had about 260 volunteers. And we took more than 250,000 photographs covering every single building. Using my web development hat, I also then put together a series of internet tools to manage this and for people to organize the photographs together. And then I reached out to Google, and they were excited by this project because they could see it was a way of getting people remotely engaged with disaster-struck areas. And they lent a couple of programmers to help teach people locally to 3D model. And then over the course of the following 3 months, we built about 70% of the city in 3D for Google Earth. Subsequently, we then had a flyover of the city and had it properly done, so now it's all beautiful and perfect. But this was the first time that people in the city could engage with what had happened to their city and at the same time communicate to people in the rest of the world how things were. It was it was closed off by the military. You couldn't walk in and have a look around normally. Third participative project is this project here, which is called Fantasticite, which was another Lego project. Again, learning from this time from the L'Aquila project, we thought, let's get kids involved in building a city. So we created a recipe, and each Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, kids had birthday parties there, and over the course of 3 months, they went from a forested landscape to a very highly dense city of Lego. And again, I was surprised by the way that people engaged with it and the kind of level of creativity that was involved. In the Lego house, we'd given quite clear instructions for what to do, and people had gone off and experimented and made special bits. And here, we gave a recipe so that people could really have fun. On to the domestic projects. This is a house in West Dorset, and what I enjoy about our domestic projects is how it's a collaboration with the client. We really enjoy exploring possibilities with them. Here we had a tiny budget, big ambitions for what to get out of the house, and we thought, how can we get the most inside for the least outside? And let's make sure we spend our money on insulation and good quality materials. So we used untreated, wavy timber boards on the outside of the building, and we built it to a very mathematically pure hyperellipse shape. This is a London project, which was driven by the client's love of books, and we thought, how can we unlock their Victorian house? Let's use the books. So we built a staircase made out of books and let that thread its way up through the back of the house. And it completely transformed a very dark Victorian London property into a really light and airy and colourful house, for a home, rather. And the final project, which is a very small project, is a house extension to a listed building in Camden. And again, we started to play with ideas of how we could make things. And we found a great timber craftsman. And working with our client, we found a slinky way of making the house extension kind of working into the complicated shape of the back of the house. And it created something that I still love. I quite frequently go back to this house. It's been built for about 10 years now. And it's still incredibly pleasurable to go into. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Yael, and I'm going to rewind very quickly through my presentation. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Barnaby. Okay, so this was a curatorial job I got from the late Will Alsop in Testbed 1 Gallery, which used to be in, what's the name? I forgot the name. Sorry about that, I'm a bit tired. Never mind. Battersea, sorry. So I just asked architects to design tables and see what comes. And it was fascinating that this was 2011, end of 2011, and everybody, different kind of architects, you know, it was all about CAD/CAM, it was all about CNC and laser cutting and all the new technologies. I found the most surprising one and fascinating one was by Helen and Hart. You can see in the front, in the middle, that look like kind of very figurative animal walking there. And also the whole idea of how they arrive there. You go, they call it the dining table. You arrive, you go to the forest, you take a tree down, you cut it into 4 pieces, and the table, you start working on the table with the different CNC machines and hands and all that. So anyhow, it was very enjoyable. In 2013, I got this project to respond to. The project was part of the Freedom Festival in Barcelona that they celebrate annually every year for a lost battle 300 years ago. So all about freedom. And there were 7 installations and 7 different architects who were asked to design in response to freedom. And each one got a buzzword. And the buzzword I got was democracy, which I found really kind of difficult and heavy. And how do you respond architecturally to such a important and loaded word? And I just realized, sorry, actually this is still okay. I just realized that, so I looked on the web and searching for ideas, and I thought democracy, human rights, and I realized like a year before then or 2 years before then, there was a huge competition, a very large competition with an impressive jury to come up with a human rights symbol. So everybody will see the symbol, think human rights. And I realized I never saw this symbol. It was this competition I'm not familiar with. So okay, I'm going to use it somehow. But it was just kind of symbol to put on T-shirts, like you see everywhere, beauty matters. So just kind of a symbol for that. So I thought it's very sunny. Most of the square is very exposed. And I thought, okay, that might be a kind of throwing shadow or something like that. And then sort of getting to know the square, I realized that it was in the old part of Barcelona, Plaza de la Mercè. It's a beautiful square with a most admired church there, that all the weddings happen there. And opposite it is the civil registrar. Civil registrar, civil weddings. So my brain kind of clicked, yes, democracy, human rights, civil weddings work well. Here, that's it, that's my installation. It will be all about giving free space to celebrate civil weddings for 14 couples. The city does it in 1 hour, like one after the other, all sign civil, and then get out happy, married. And so then that was kind of how the idea evolved. So basically, as you can see, the symbol became a very large inflatable made by amazing, wonderful Catalan, actually Spanish artist who was actually an chemical engineer. Don't ask me why. And then you have the walk, walking along the aisle like in every other wedding and celebrating, getting this space for free to celebrate your wedding, where the human rights symbol is kind of, as the sun goes in the sky, move in the sky, the shadow kind of moved and along the square. You can feel the size, just seeing me next to it. And that was the render, preparing for it. I was extremely worried about what height, what will create the best perspective of that. And that was the real thing. Quite enjoyable to see it up there. This was a competition I did. I do sometimes competition. I have kind of periods where I do lots of competition, not winning anything, and move forward. But this was a competition. It's very dear to me because it was a very beautiful experience also working on it. It was a big competition, room for... time is up. Sorry. Went too long. I'll just say that there is sorry, I'll just say one thing about it. You see there, the shining things look like color, and the sort of major idea there was I had this in front of me all the time, this collar adoring a Victorian neck, and there was it's all about niches, niche up, down, and niche up there, and I love cozy niches. And I had to collaborate with an artist, and she did all the patterns for the niches. So actually you sit, you live in the niche, and then the collar extended. That was the artist's work. And that was the result of it. And I'll finish there. I won't go another. It's about the Magic Garden, and that's Barnaby stuff already. Thank you.
Right, my time. I need another. Yeah. Okay. I'm supposed to introduce Soma. Which one I have to?
That's forward.
Okay. Thank you. I'm supposed to introduce Soma, our small practice based in Vienna. It's now around since a little bit more than a decade, I would say. We are working together, Kristina Schinegger and myself. We are working together. And since the beginning or starting of our practice, we were sort of very interested, or we were using form, not only as a kind of way to describe three-dimensionally objects and architectural projects, but also form as a way to express content, and also form as a carrier for spatial concepts. And to describe these forms, we used surfaces usually, continuous surfaces in particular, because they were very malleable, they were flexible, they were soft enough in order to wrap them around program and content. And also, as you can see here in a model study, for example, to articulate spatial concepts. Now, these surfaces then were used on one hand to conceal, like interior or program, and sometimes they also were used to reveal, like here, this facade is opening up through these lamellas and reveals the view towards the outside or vice versa. In this case, the lamella facade is a very special facade. It's not using hinges in order to rotating the lamellas open, but rather it uses a new technique. It uses material properties and bending these lamella strips open. So the double curved body of this building is literally opening up. Now, revealing and concealing as a concept is something which we still use. This is a small project or contribution to a competition which is more recent, where we try to develop a kind of three-dimensional pavilion where the visitor is constantly finding himself in situations where he can ask himself whether I'm inside, outside, or somewhere in between. And you see, the surface is highly articulated and develops at the same time not only the spatial concept, but is also developing a very, let's say, a very unique aesthetic concept. And then there's also the question how to activate these surfaces and how to make them productive and how to bring use and functionality as a layer to the building, especially like here, for example, as this is a building envelope which integrates a lot of unusual functions. Or like this is a good example where we try to visualize things which are usually hidden or not observable. For example, here we try to show what usually is going on inside of a material. So we were analyzing and studying stress lines and force flows, flipping them towards the outside of the bridge structure, but not only to show them, but actually articulate them as fins, so they become an integral part of the structural system. And furthermore, so they are not only structural, they are also used in order to carry out certain functions of a certain kind of functionality when it comes to the railing or the integration of the lighting design. And again, through that, the bridge is becoming a very strong character. From horizontal structures to a vertical structure, this is a fibrous 330-meter high tower proposal for an observation tower in Taiwan, which we where we try to work with fibers in real steel pipes with a very small diameter, which would be weak. But as a group and bundled together, grouped together, they become strands and the integrity and the load-bearing structure, which are also through the bifurcation and bundling are able to carry a program program of the observation tower. Now, this relationship between different parts becoming one, so part to whole relationships, is something which interests us very much, or interested us very much, and we try to understand how single elements with almost no special characteristics, as a group starting to develop a kind of in that case, for example, a kind of pattern. So collectively, in a formation, they start to be productive and develop these patterns. And these kind of small studies then were also leading in a realization project, which we see here, an early study model where 1,500 of these aluminium profiles were aggregated together into an art and music pavilion. Now, in this case, there was also the idea that we use an evolutionary algorithm in order to balance out different aims or different different ideas. Like on one hand, you had to make sure that you have a sound structure which is load-bearing. On the other hand, you would like to make sure that it covers also the program of the pavilion or enough space in it. And as a third criteria, we were looking for architectural characteristic, a very special architectural characteristic which has a lot to do with the angle of these profiles towards each other. And this evolutionary algorithm was helping out to balance these three fields out against each other, which finally was leading into this pavilion design. And also the materiality, because the reflectiveness of the aluminum profiles is playing a role as they are catching light and color from the surrounding, which gives the pavilion a different, let's say, touch or atmosphere whenever you put it on a different location. Which basically is leading into this art installation or architectural installation in an art context in a museum, which is dealing with the notion of the formless, which now literally has whether a form nor it has a silhouette. It is also a kind of unfinished piece, as you could extend it wherever you want. There is an open structure where you can continue to build upon it. And what you see here is a kind of aggregation of metal spirals, which also do not really need any kind of joints. They are literally holding together by friction and in the entanglement of these spirals. Basically, you see from the very beginning of our work to this project now that we have a quite big spectrum from the surfaces to the dissolving structure, the formless structure. And in those kind of reservoir, we enjoy to situate our projects. Thank you very much.
I'm on. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Kristina. Thank you, Barnaby. Thank you, Yael. Well, we've had an incredible morning of cross-disciplinary practice and thinking about concepts from a higher level, and now we've just dived deep into the practice itself. So I think that's a really fantastic place for us to start. I'd kind of like to start with a question that brings you back to this central notion of beauty. And having looked at the breadth of your practice in that very quick survey, I wonder if I can ask you both to reflect upon the installations that you've done here in Tallinn, and to perhaps reflect upon whether this charge that Yael has given you to think about beauty in your practice, whether there was something new that was revealed to you, or whether there was something that you can take forward in your practice into the future. Maybe we can start with you, Kristina.
Actually, that was a really interesting discussion, ongoing discussion with Yael, because she was also doing the AD, and we are also involved there, and Yael wanted us to have two completely different chapters. So one was the Soma chapter that looked at the retrospective of the practice, and one was a piece for Tallinn. And it was really interesting because it opened up also a dialogue between what we're doing here and our work. And I think what we did then is we indulged ourselves completely into, we said, well, let's do something what we think is beauty, into personal beauty, I would say. And we also, probably we built a little bit of a discourse among Johannes is sitting there, one of our most talented students, and we created this discourse among us because it's so interesting how you have really a shared sense of beauty, and you almost need no words because you just show each other pictures or animations or images, and I think that was really interesting. And looking back onto our own work, and looking back at the decade of our practice, you see how much, of course, you're in a context and in a discussion, and we come from continuous surface to where we start to dissolve things, and then and now I think we're bringing back again all these aspects and kind of trying to synthesize things again. That was really interesting, yeah. But it was really a dialogue, and it was interesting to have Yael's eyes on our work, I have to say, yeah.
And Stefan, you both write in the catalogue essay about this notion of the beautifully sublime and how that emerges in your practice through particular processes. I wonder if you can just expand very quickly on that, the idea of the beautifully sublime.
You don't need it, I think.
Oh, yeah, true. I don't need it. I know just personally, I think something which, I also thought, what is beauty for myself? And I think it is something which touches me because there is something I cannot decode by default. There is some sort of, I don't know, call it miracle or something, a riddle about it, which I really cannot grasp it or completely understand it as a whole. And in that moment, it touches me, and I have the feeling, to me, that is something beautiful to me. As soon as I understood it completely, entirely, I have the feeling this miracle is gone, and it loses a little bit of the beauty it has before. That also means maybe that beauty is something which should probably a concept which needs constant, should renew itself, because it does not age very well.
It's interesting, that idea of the miracle, and Maria Lee said something really intriguing just before lunch, which was this idea of beauty operators that resonated so much, I think, and this idea of a kind of agency and responsibility in that role. And Barnaby, it made me think of that, looking at your participatory projects, this kind of idea of being a beauty operator, but with others. I wonder if you can kind of reflect on that.
I think I was reflecting on the way I work in comparison with how Soma work, and realising we have quite a lot in common, and also there's quite a strong divergence in one way. I don't know why, but I'm moved a lot by the mathematics of nature and the way things can evolve and change. But when I turn it into architecture, it's always much rougher and hairier than intended. But I suppose one of the things I was reflecting on is that architecture is about it's an interplay between the physicality of architecture, its environment, which is necessarily complicated and changing, and also the complexity of the participants in architecture. And I suppose in my presentation I was kind of talking about the participants as the initiators of things, but where I really get a lot of joy out of architecture is looking at how people over time interact and work with their architecture. And that fed very strongly into the project that we did for the exhibition, where on one end we were trying to think of ways of generating cities by growth, and at the other end we're trying to think about how people as participants in their cities ends up changing them, and how you can have that kind of localized interplay with your own little bit of your city. And I can see that in some of the other exhibits as well. So the March project, which is, has a different kind of scale of operation where you have your personal thing you can move around. I think the beauty operates on so many different levels, and there have been conversations today where, reflecting on the idea of beauty as this sort of the perceptual state of trying to understand something and engaging with trying to understand some underlying thing to it. And I think you're right. I know with music that I can become obsessed by a piece of music because I know my brain's trying to understand it. I may get to a certain point after months of boring everybody else with it that my brain has satisfied itself that it understands what's going on there, and maybe I'm slightly less attracted to it. But I do think that even going back with time and changing context and changing associations, you find beauty again in something that has that inherent, intelligent complexity. I don't know what the right description is.
I have an urge, there's only 2.5 minutes, and I have an urge to say something about Soma's vague formation. That if any of you will have the AD magazine, there's a beautiful photograph of it. But I was stunned by it. And I think partly is because what I saw, but mostly because how clever it is. It's actually an amazing project that is clever in the engineering of it, because you have stainless steel tubes and you manage to make them behave like felt wool and get the strength of it right, the strength of it, like you get the felt being strong, but this is stainless steel tubes and they look wonderful. But it's the cleverness. How did they do that? How did they did it? And I think the aesthetics of it capture this cleverness. You see it in the pictures I selected for the magazine, and thank God the graphic designer put it in the right place. I think it shows how kind of aesthetics can catch something which is so clever, and the cleverness and the surprise is absolutely there. And for me, I know what they are saying, that okay, you get used to it, fine. Got it, next. But when I see this photograph, I wish I was there to see the object. I enjoy it every time again, because it's so beautiful. Yeah.
Well, we've only got a minute. I
Yes.
feel like we've only just started to scratch the surface. But I did want to just quickly pick up on this idea of opposition in beauty. And we heard earlier some of those ideas. One of the terms that you use in your writing, Yael and Barnaby, is this idea of competitive dependency, which I think you can see in the March Studio project as well. I wonder if maybe you could all just quickly reflect on this kind of oppositional or tension, a rift is what Graham Harman terms it in his essay in the catalogue. If you can just quickly reflect on that as we wrap up. Maybe start with you, yeah.
Barnaby, I think it was your term that you used there, so we can all extend. I think we have our own interpretation. I'm sure each one of you, it's a nice term, but Barnaby
it's
came
probably a consequence of reading too much in the early summer. But I started to try and reflect on what is it that I enjoy in the underlying beauty of natural systems. And one aspect of that, which I kept on being fascinated by, is how things that are maybe competing for or sharing an environment work together, and how that creates both tension between those things, which I think is quite important, but also I just enjoy that kind of conversation between different organisms that are trying to have access to the same resources, and how those create a dialogue with each other, which is obvious in nature, and we're used to perceiving that. And it's also quite an important part of, I think, beauty in cities. If you have a fantastically neatly ordered overall city, you very quickly lose a lot of what's interesting and attractive about it. And I feel that as humans, we're probably hardwired to spot patterns in nature as a potential risk, but also at the same time appreciate the complex assembly of things around us. And that competition between different organisms is, I think, quite fundamental to that.
Time's up.
Maybe if it's okay with you, Kristina and Stefan, we might leave it there because it says time's up.
Yes.
But thank you very much.
You can stay
it was
here.
A great conversation.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.